Let's be honest for a moment. Motivation feels good. It's exciting. It gives you that rush where everything seems possible, where tomorrow is the day you finally change your life. And that's exactly why it's cheap. Because it shows up when things are easy, when the message hits right, when the music is loud, and the room is full of energy. But discipline? Discipline doesn't care how you feel. Discipline shows up when the alarm goes off and you don't want to move. Discipline shows up when no one is watching, when the results haven't arrived yet, and when quitting would be far more comfortable than continuing. That's why discipline is expensive. It charges you upfront in effort, inconsistency, and sacrifice long before it ever pays you back. Most people don't fail because they lack information. They fail because they rely on emotion to do a job that requires commitment. They wait to feel motivated to act instead of acting and letting the results create momentum. And that gap between what you feel like doing and what needs to be done, that gap, is where outcomes are decided. If you want average results, motivation is enough. But if you want something rare, something durable, then discipline is the price of admission. And the question isn't whether discipline works. The question is whether you're willing to pay for it every day, long after motivation has left the room. Motivation is emotional and temporary, while discipline is structural and permanent. And understanding this distinction changes how progress is actually made. Motivation is a feeling. It comes from external triggers, a speech, a video, a conversation, a sudden surge of hope. It creates excitement and the illusion of readiness. In that moment, everything feels possible. Goals feel closer. Effort feels lighter. The problem is not that motivation is useless. The problem is that it is unreliable. Emotions fluctuate. Energy rises and falls. What excites you today may do nothing for you tomorrow. When progress depends on how you feel, progress becomes inconsistent by default. Motivation operates on emotion, and emotion is reactive. It responds to circumstances rather than controlling them. When things are going well, motivation is high. When things slow down, when results don't show up fast enough, or when the work becomes repetitive and uncomfortable, motivation disappears. This is why people start strong and fade quickly. They confuse emotional readiness with actual commitment. They assume that because they feel inspired, they are prepared for the cost of execution. But feelings do not carry weight over time. They burn fast and fade faster. Discipline, on the other hand, is not a feeling. It is a structure. It is a decision embedded into behavior. Discipline does not ask how you feel before acting. It operates independently of mood, confidence, or excitement. It is built through routines, rules, and standards that remove the need for constant emotional negotiation. Where motivation says, "I'll do it when I feel ready," discipline says, "This is what I do regardless." That difference is everything, because discipline is structural, it creates consistency, and consistency is what produces results. Real progress is rarely dramatic. It is repetitive, often boring, and frequently uncomfortable. Discipline accepts this reality and plans for it. It anticipates resistance. It assumes that most days you will not feel like doing the work, and it builds systems that function anyway. This is why discipline is permanent. Not because it never breaks, but because it does not rely on conditions to exist. Motivation is cheap because it costs nothing to feel inspired. Anyone can feel motivated for a moment. It requires no sacrifice, no identity change, and no sustained effort. You can consume motivation endlessly without producing a single result. Discipline is expensive because it demands payment in advance. It requires time, effort, discomfort, and often the willingness to look foolish before competence arrives. It asks you to act before you feel confident, and to continue long after the excitement is gone. People often misunderstand discipline as willpower, but willpower is still emotional. Discipline is closer to identity. When behavior becomes part of who you are rather than something you negotiate daily, it lasts. You stop asking whether you should do the work and start asking only how and when. This removes friction. Decision fatigue disappears. Progress becomes predictable. Motivation fluctuates, but identity-based discipline stabilizes output. The permanence of discipline also comes from compounding. All discipline actions repeated over time create disproportionate results. Motivation spikes lead to bursts of action, but bursts do not compound. Discipline does. It stacks effort quietly, invisibly, day after day. Most people underestimate this because the early stages look unimpressive. There's no emotional payoff at first, no applause, no immediate reward. Discipline requires faith in process rather than excitement about outcome. Another reason motivation fails is that it externalizes responsibility. It depends on something happening to you, a feeling, a spark, a perfect moment. Discipline internalizes responsibility. It places control back in your hands. You act because you decided to, not because circumstances aligned. This shift is subtle but powerful. It turns progress from something you hope for into something you execute. When people say they lack motivation, what they often lack is structure. They have goals but no systems. They want outcomes, but have not designed behaviors that make those outcomes inevitable. Discipline fills that gap. It does not eliminate discomfort. It normalizes it. It does not promise ease. It guarantees progress if maintained. Motivation can start the engine, but it cannot drive the distance. Discipline is what keeps the vehicle moving when the road is long, empty, and repetitive. This is why high performers do not chase motivation. They build lives where discipline is the default setting, where action happens first and emotion catches up later, where progress is measured in adherence to process, rather than intensity of feeling, where the work continues whether the day feels good or bad, whether confidence is high or low, whether anyone is watching or not, because discipline is not something they use, it is something they live, reinforced daily through systems, habits, and standards that operate even when enthusiasm is absent, and the only thing left is the commitment to show up and do the work as planned again and again without needing to feel inspired to begin. Most people confuse feeling inspired with making progress, and this misunderstanding quietly destroys long-term results. Inspiration feels productive because it creates emotional movement. Your mind is active, your confidence rises, and your goals suddenly feel closer. You think differently, talk differently, and even imagine a new version of yourself. In that moment, it feels like something meaningful is happening. But feeling inspired is not the same as creating forward motion. It is internal stimulation, not external execution. Progress only exists where action produces measurable change, and inspiration alone produces none. The danger of inspiration is that it mimics progress without requiring effort. Watching a powerful video, listening to a strong speech, or reading an intense quote can feel like growth because it changes your emotional state. You feel clearer, stronger, and more capable. Your brain rewards this feeling with a sense of accomplishment, even though nothing has been built, improved, or completed. This false reward is what traps people. They mistake emotional uplift for forward movement, and because the brain already feels satisfied, the urgency to act decreases. Real progress is often quiet and underwhelming. It does not come with dramatic emotional highs. It looks like repetition, refinement, and consistency. It is doing the same task again even though it no longer excites you. It is measuring output instead of chasing feelings. Because this kind of work lacks emotional stimulation, many people avoid it and instead return to inspiration, where the payoff is immediate and comfortable. Over time, they become consumers of motivation rather than producers of results. Inspiration is easy to access and easy to abandon. You can feel inspired in seconds and lose it just as quickly. Progress requires sustained effort over time, often without visible reward in the beginning. This gap creates frustration. People assume that if they were truly making progress, they would feel more motivated, more excited, more confident. When those feelings fade, they assume something is wrong and look for new inspiration instead of recognizing that discomfort is a normal part of execution. Another reason people confuse inspiration with progress is because inspiration creates intention. You start planning, imagining, and talking about what you are going to do. You share goals, set ambitions, and visualize outcomes. These activities feel productive because they are future-oriented, but intention does not move the needle. Talking about work is not the same as doing work. Planning endlessly without execution becomes a sophisticated form of procrastination, one that feels responsible but produces no outcome. Progress is defined by evidence. Something tangible changes. A skill improves. A task is completed. A metric moves. Inspiration leaves no trail. You cannot measure. You cannot compound it. You cannot rely on it tomorrow. Yet many people evaluate their success based on how inspired they feel, rather than what they have actually done. This creates a cycle where they are emotionally active but operationally stagnant. There is also an ego component. Feeling inspired allows people to maintain a positive self-image without facing the risk of failure. As long as you are inspired, you can tell yourself you are on the path, even if you never walk it. Taking action introduces the possibility of falling short, being slow, or being bad at something. Inspiration protects the ego by staying in the realm of potential rather than performance. Progress, by contrast, is humbling. It exposes gaps, it highlights weaknesses, it forces feedback. You see where you are inefficient, inconsistent, or unprepared. This is uncomfortable, and discomfort drives people back toward inspiration, where everything still feels possible and nothing's been tested. Over time, they become addicted to potential instead of committed to process. High performers understand that inspiration is a byproduct, not a prerequisite. They do not wait to feel inspired to work. They work, and inspiration follows competence. Confidence comes after repetition, not before it. Progress creates belief, not the other way around. This reverses how most people operate. Instead of asking, do I feel like doing this? They ask, what does progress require today? And then they do it regardless of mood. When you shift your focus from inspiration to progress, your standards change. You stop asking whether something feels meaningful and start asking whether it moves the needle. You begin measuring days by output rather than emotion. This removes confusion. You no longer feel successful just because you felt motivated. You feel successful only when something concrete is done. The longer someone stays trapped in inspiration without execution, the more frustrated they become. They feel busy but unfulfilled, hopeful but stuck. Over time, this creates cynicism. They start believing that motivation does not work, that advice is useless, or that they are somehow different. The truth is simpler. They replaced action with emotion and expected results. Progress demands boring consistency, uncomfortable honesty, and the willingness to do work even when it feels insignificant. It requires separating how you feel from what you do. Inspiration can start movement, but it cannot sustain it. Only repeated action does that. When you understand this, you stop chasing the feeling of being inspired and start building proof of progress through daily execution, knowing that real momentum is created by doing the work when there is no emotional reward, no excitement, no applause, just a quiet accumulation of effort that eventually turns into skill, leverage, confidence, and results that speak for themselves long after the feeling that started has faded. And the only thing left is the work that was done day after day, unnoticed at first, uncelebrated early on, but steadily compounding beneath the surface until the gap between intention and outcome finally closes, and the difference between feeling inspired and actually progressing becomes undeniable in the form of real, measurable change that no longer depends on emotion to exist and continues to move forward even when enthusiasm is gone, and the process has become routine, and the days blend together, and the only indicator of success is that the work keeps getting done whether it feels exciting or not, and the results slowly begin to appear in ways that cannot be ignored and no longer need to be imagined because they are now visible in the output itself, and in the discipline of continuing to execute without needing the emotional high that once felt like progress but was only ever a signal to begin, rather than proof that anything had truly moved forward, and the realization sets in that inspiration was never the engine but merely the spark, and the real distance was covered only by action repeated long enough to transform effort into outcome and identity into reality, through consistent execution that does not announce itself, but builds quietly over time until what once felt impossible now feels inevitable to the simple act of doing what needs to be done regardless of how it feels in the moment. Discipline costs comfort, time, and ego every single day, and that is precisely why most people avoid it even while claiming they want success. Comfort is the first price discipline demands. Human nature is wired to seek ease, familiarity, and immediate relief. Discipline directly opposes this instinct. It requires choosing discomfort now in exchange for a result later, waking up earlier than necessary, doing the work when it feels repetitive, sticking to standards when shortcuts are available. All of these actions disrupt comfort. Motivation will never ask you to give up comfort consistently. Discipline will, and it will ask again tomorrow, and the day after that, without apology. Comfort is seductive because it feels harmless. Skipping one workout, delaying one task, choosing rest over effort, feels small in isolation. Discipline exposes the cumulative cost of these choices. Every time comfort is prioritized, progress is delayed. Discipline forces you to confront this trade-off daily. It makes you aware that comfort is not free. It is paid for with momentum, growth, and long-term outcomes. This awareness itself is uncomfortable, which is why many people unconsciously avoid discipline and label it as extreme or unnecessary. Time is the second cost, and it is often underestimated. Discipline requires allocating time intentionally, not opportunistically. It means doing important work even when life is busy, even when energy is low, even when there are more entertaining options available. Discipline does not fit neatly into spare moments. It requires protected time, planned effort, and repeated investment. This often means saying no to distractions, social activities, and short-term pleasures. Time spent building skills, systems, or habits does not always feel productive in the moment, especially when results are delayed. Discipline demands that you trust the process enough to continue investing time without immediate feedback. Most people say they do not have time, but what they actually lack is priority. Discipline reveals priorities through behavior, not attention. When someone consistently makes time for what matters, it is not because they have more hours, but because they have accepted the cost of allocating those hours deliberately. This is expensive, because once time is spent, it cannot be recovered. Discipline forces you to spend time today on outcomes you may not see for months or years. That delay is uncomfortable, and many people abandon discipline because they want proof before they commit, rather than committing to create proof. The third and most painful cost of discipline is ego. Discipline humbles you. It requires admitting that you are not as good as you want to be yet, and then showing up anyway. It demands repetition in areas where you are weak, slow, or inexperienced. This threatens the ego, which prefers activities that reinforce a positive self-image. Discipline often places you in situations where progress is slow and mistakes are visible. You must be willing to look unskilled before becoming competent, inconsistent before becoming consistent, unknown before becoming recognized. Ego also resists discipline because discipline removes excuses. When you commit to standards and routines, you lose the comfort of blaming circumstances. You cannot say you lacked motivation or the right mood. Discipline exposes the truth of effort. This level of accountability is heavy. It forces you to confront gaps between who you say you are and how you actually behave. Many people protect their ego by avoiding this confrontation and instead staying in cycles of intention without execution. Discipline also costs ego socially. It can make you look obsessive, boring, or rigid to others. It often means choosing long-term goals over short-term approval. You may be misunderstood, questioned, or dismissed for your consistency. Discipline does not always look impressive in the early stages. There is no applause for showing up daily. There is often silence, and silence does not feed the ego. Discipline requires internal validation when external validation is absent. What makes discipline especially expensive is that these costs are not one-time payments. You do not sacrifice comfort once and earn it forever. You do not invest time once and achieve permanence. You do not humble the ego once and become immune. Discipline charges you repeatedly. Every day presents a new opportunity to choose ease over effort, distraction over focus, image over improvement. Discipline requires you to make the same choice again and again, often without feeling stronger or more confident than the day before. This is why discipline filters people, not because it is complicated, but because it is consistent. Anyone can endure discomfort briefly. Few are willing to endure it routinely. Anyone can sacrifice time occasionally. Few will structure their life around it. Anyone can sacrifice time occasionally. Few will structure their life around it. Anyone can set aside ego in theory. Few will do it in practice when pride is threatened repeatedly. Discipline does not reward intensity, it rewards endurance. The people who achieve uncommon results are not immune to discomfort, time pressure, or ego resistance. They simply accept these costs as non-negotiable. They stop arguing with reality. They understand that comfort delays growth, that time must be invested before it pays off, and that ego must be managed rather than obeyed. Discipline becomes less about force and more about acceptance. You accept that the work will often feel inconvenient, slow, and unglamorous, and you do it anyway. Over time, something shifts. Comfort becomes less important than progress. Time spent building becomes more satisfying than time spent escaping. Ego becomes quieter as competence grows. Discipline does not become easy, but it becomes familiar. The cost remains, but so does the return. And because discipline is paid daily, the results are earned daily, quietly stacking effort and outcomes that eventually appear inevitable to those who never saw the price being paid behind the scenes. The early mornings, the repetition, the restraint, the humility, the invisible choices that no one applauded but that compounded relentlessly, shaping skill, character, and capacity through the simple act of choosing what is difficult over what is comfortable again and again, without needing validation, motivation to continue doing the work that most people avoid precisely because it demands payment every single day without exception. Results come from systems, not moods, and this distinction determines whether progress is accidental or inevitable. Moods are unstable by nature. They shift based on sleep, stress, environment, and countless variables outside your control. Building outcomes on something so volatile is a fragile strategy. When action depends on mood, effort becomes inconsistent, and inconsistency produces unpredictable results. Systems exist to remove this instability. They create structure that functions regardless of emotional state, turning progress from a matter of chance into a matter of process. A system is a repeatable set of actions designed to produce a specific outcome. It does not require inspiration, excitement, or confidence to operate. It requires adherence. This is why systems outperform motivation. A motivated person may work hard on a good day, but a system ensures work gets done on every day. Over time, average effort applied consistently outperforms intense effort applied sporadically. Systems make consistency automatic rather than optional. Relying on mood feels natural, because it feels honest. People believe they should act when they feel aligned, energized, or ready. The problem is that readiness is subjective and constantly shifting. Waiting to feel right delays action indefinitely. Systems bypass this internal debate. They replace the question, "Do I feel like doing this?" with, is this scheduled or is this the next step? When behavior is triggered by structure rather than emotion, execution becomes reliable. Moods also distort perception of effort. On high energy days, work feels easier and progress feels faster. On low energy days, work feels easier and progress feels faster. On low energy days, the same work feels heavier and less worthwhile. This creates a misleading feedback loop where people believe the work itself has changed, when in reality, only their mood has. Systems flatten this distortion. They standardize effort so that output remains stable across emotional states. This protects progress from the ups and downs that derail most people. Another weakness of mood-based execution is that it prioritizes feeling good over getting better. People gravitate toward tasks that match their emotional state instead of tasks that move the needle. When motivated, they overwork. When unmotivated, they avoid work entirely. Systems impose balance. They regulate input, pacing, and recovery. They prevent burnout on high days and stagnation on low days. This steady rhythm is what allows progress to compound. Systems also reduce decision fatigue. Every decision consumes mental energy. When you rely on mood, you are constantly deciding whether to act, what to do, and how much effort to apply. This drains focus before the work even begins. Systems predefine these decisions. Time, task, and standard are already set. Execution becomes mechanical rather than emotional. This preserves cognitive energy for the work itself rather than the negotiation around it. Results are the natural output of systems because systems are designed with outcomes in mind. You do not hope for results. You engineer them. If the system is followed, the result is a predictable consequence. If the result is not appearing, you do not blame motivation. You adjust the system. This creates a feedback loop rooted in logic rather than emotion. Progress becomes something you refine rather than something you chase. People often resist systems because they feel restrictive. They believe structure will limit creativity or freedom. In reality, systems create freedom by removing chaos. When basic execution is handled automatically, mental space opens for higher-level thinking. Creativity thrives within constraints. High performers use systems to protect their energy and focus so they can apply creativity where it actually matters. Moods are reactive. They respond to events. Systems are proactive. They shape behavior in advance. Systems are proactive. They shape behavior in advance. This difference is critical. When life becomes stressful, unpredictable, or overwhelming, moods become even less reliable. This is exactly when progress matters most and when systems prove their value. A system does not care that the day is difficult. It continues to function, providing stability when everything else is uncertain. Another reason systems produce results is that they create identity reinforcement. Repeated actions shape self-perception. When you follow a system daily, you begin to see yourself as someone who executes consistently. This identity makes future action easier. You no longer need to convince yourself to act. Action aligns with who you believe you are. Moods fluctuate, but identity stabilizes behavior over time. Results achieved through mood-based effort feel fragile because they depend on maintaining a certain emotional state. Results achieved through systems feel durable because they are supported by structure. Even if motivation drops, the system continues. Even if confidence wavers, the process remains. This durability is what separates temporary success from lasting performance. Most people want results without designing systems. They focus on goals, vision, and desire, but neglect the mechanics of daily execution. Systems are the unglamorous middle layer between intention and outcome. They are boring to build and invisible when they work. But without them, progress remains inconsistent and dependent on how you feel that day. When you shift your focus from moods to systems, your relationship with work changes. You stop waiting to feel good enough to begin. You begin because it is time to begin. You stop evaluating days based on how you felt and start evaluating them based on whether you followed the process. This creates clarity. Success becomes measurable through adherence rather than emotion. Over time, systems create momentum that moods never could. Small actions repeated consistently accumulate into skill, output, and confidence. Results emerge not as surprises, but as expected outcomes of a process that has been running quietly in the background. This is why disciplined individuals trust systems more than feelings. They understand that moods come and go, but a well-designed system more than feelings. They understand that moods come and go, followed daily, will continue to produce results regardless of how they feel when they wake up, what kind of day they are having, or whether enthusiasm is present. Because the system does not ask for permission from emotion and does not negotiate with comfort. It simply executes as designed and allows time and consistency to do the work that moods can never be trusted to sustain. Waiting to feel ready is a hidden form of procrastination, because it disguises avoidance as responsibility and hesitation as preparation. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. People tell themselves they just need more clarity, more confidence, more information, or the right emotional state before they begin. This narrative feels mature and thoughtful, but underneath it is often fear of discomfort, failure, or exposure. Readiness becomes a moving target that conveniently stays just out of reach, allowing delay without guilt. Feeling ready is an emotional condition, not a prerequisite for action. It depends on confidence, certainty, and perceived competence, all of which are usually created by action rather than preceding it. Most people wait for readiness as if it will arrive externally, but readiness is built internally through repetition. You do not feel ready and then act. You act, struggle, adjust, and over time the feeling of readiness begins to emerge. Reversing this order traps people in planning mode indefinitely. The illusion of readiness is reinforced by the idea that starting unprepared is irresponsible. People believe they need perfect timing, perfect conditions, or perfect knowledge to avoid mistakes. In reality, mistakes are the mechanism through which competence is developed. Waiting to feel ready delays exposure to feedback, which delays improvement. This creates a cycle where the very thing someone believes they need in order to start can only be gained by starting. This form of procrastination is especially dangerous because it looks productive. Researching, preparing, organizing, and thinking feel like progress. These activities provide the comfort of movement without the risk of execution. The brain rewards preparation with a sense of control, even though nothing meaningful has changed. Over time, preparation expands to fill the space where action should be, and progress stalls while effort appears to be ongoing. Waiting to feel ready also protects the ego. As long as you have not started, your potential remains intact. You can still believe you would perform well if you tried. Action threatens this belief by introducing evidence. Once you act, performance becomes measurable. You may discover you are slower, less skilled, or less consistent than you imagined. Avoiding action preserves self-image, and readiness becomes a justification for avoidance. Another reason readiness is appealing is that it shifts responsibility away from the present moment. If you are not ready yet, then inaction feels justified. Responsibility is postponed until some future version of you appears, one who is more confident, more disciplined, or more capable. This future-focused mindset removes pressure from today, but also removes agency. Progress is outsourced to a version of yourself that does not yet exist. High performers understand that readiness is a consequence, not a cause. They begin before they feel prepared because they understand that the early stages are supposed to feel uncomfortable and inefficient. They expect confusion. They expect resistance. They expect to be bad at first. This expectation removes surprise and reduces emotional friction. When discomfort appears, it is not interpreted as a signal to stop, but as confirmation that the process is working. Waiting to feel ready also ignores the role of momentum. Action creates momentum, and momentum reduces resistance. The first step is often the hardest because there is no evidence of progress yet. Once movement begins, even imperfect movement, resistance decreases, small wins accumulate, confidence grows not from thinking about doing the work, but from seeing that the work is getting done. Readiness grows out of motion, not contemplation. There is also a cost to delay that is rarely acknowledged. Time passes whether you act or not. Skills decay, opportunities shift, energy changes. Waiting does not preserve a perfect starting point. It erodes it. By the time someone finally feels ready, they are often starting from a weaker position than if they had begun earlier in an unready state. The irony is that waiting for readiness often makes starting harder, not easier. Readiness-based procrastination often hides behind discipline language. People say they're being strategic, patient, or thoughtful. Strategy without execution is theory. Patience without action is stagnation. Thoughtfulness without feedback is speculation. Discipline is not about waiting for optimal conditions. It is about acting consistently under imperfect ones. When you remove readiness as a requirement, behavior simplifies. The question shifts from, am I ready, to, what is the smallest action I can take today? This reframing lowers the barrier to entry. You do not need to feel confident to take a small step. You do not need clarity to begin experimenting. You do not need certainty to collect data. Action becomes accessible and progress becomes possible. Most breakthroughs are not the result of perfect preparation, but of imperfect execution sustained over time. People who succeed are not those who felt ready earliest, but those who are willing to feel unready the longest. They accept discomfort as part of the process rather than as a signal to delay. Over time, what once felt intimidating becomes familiar, and what once required courage becomes routine, but only because they refused to wait for a feeling that was never meant to lead. and instead allowed action to shape confidence, capability, and clarity through direct experience that could never be gained by waiting and thinking and preparing without ever stepping into the work itself. Discipline compounds quietly while motivation burns out loudly, and this distinction is the difference between temporary effort and lasting achievement. Motivation is explosive. It arrives in sudden bursts, often triggered by emotional highs, a powerful speech, an inspiring video, a dramatic moment that makes everything seem possible. In that instant, energy surges, confidence rises, and the world feels aligned with your ambitions. But like a spark in dry grass, motivation flares brightly and then fades. The intensity is intoxicating, but it is fleeting. Once the initial rush passes, the action fueled by it often collapses, leaving only the memory of enthusiasm in the absence of results. Discipline operates differently. It is quiet, methodical, and incremental. It does not rely on emotional highs or fleeting inspiration. Discipline is a system of behaviors and standards applied consistently over time, regardless of mood, confidence, or external circumstances. While motivation demands drama, discipline demands repetition. Motivation seeks the extraordinary moment. Discipline embraces the mundane, the routine, and the uncomfortable, knowing that true results are built not in flashes, but in sustained effort. The compounding power of discipline comes from consistency. Small actions repeated daily accumulate into significant outcomes. One disciplined step may seem insignificant on its own, but repeated over weeks, months, and years, it produces exponential results. A single workout is minor. A single healthy meal is trivial. One focused work session may feel ordinary. Yet these small choices, executed without interruption, add up. Motivation, by contrast, offers bursts of intensity that feel productive but rarely compound. A day of feeling motivated can create a temporary surge, but without consistent follow-through, it leaves no lasting effect. Motivation is reactive, while discipline is proactive. Motivation is often triggered by external stimuli. A video, a quote, a conversation, or an event. It depends on external factors to arrive. Discipline does not wait. It sets internal rules and standards and follows them regardless of external conditions. Discipline is a commitment to action even when inspiration is absent, even when the work feels boring, and even when immediate results are invisible. This is why discipline compounds. It operates continuously, quietly stacking small wins that eventually produce massive change. The loud nature of motivation also makes it unreliable as a driver of progress. Emotional energy fluctuates naturally. Some days, you feel unstoppable. Other days, you feel exhausted, distracted, or indifferent. If results depend solely on motivation, progress is inherently inconsistent. Discipline removes this dependency. It establishes a baseline of effort that is independent of how you feel on any given day. It creates a system where action continues despite mental or emotional fluctuations, and over time, the results of that continuous effort far outpace the sporadic bursts fueled by motivation. Another reason discipline compounds is that it integrates feedback into action. Daily repeated behaviors create measurable data. You see what works, what doesn't, and what can be improved. Each cycle of execution informs the next, allowing small adjustments that increase efficiency and impact. Motivation, in contrast, often drives action in short bursts without iterative learning. It provides energy, but not necessarily the framework to translate that energy into sustainable improvement. Without feedback and repetition, initial enthusiasm often fades without leaving measurable results behind. Discipline also builds identity and habit, which are self-reinforcing. When you consistently follow rules, routines, and standards, you begin to see yourself as someone who acts despite discomfort. This identity makes future discipline easier because the behavior becomes part of who you are, rather than something you must negotiate daily. Motivation does not reinforce identity. Feeling inspired today does not make you disciplined tomorrow. Discipline, through compounding, shapes character, skills, and outcomes over time in a way that motivation alone cannot. The difference between loud motivation and quiet discipline is also visible in the timing of results. Motivation gives the illusion of rapid progress because of the energy it generates, but this progress is often inconsistent and short-lived. Discipline creates results more slowly at first, because small, repeated actions accumulate invisibly. Over months and years, however, the results of discipline become undeniable. What seemed insignificant in the moment compounds into skill, leverage, credibility, and achievement that far surpasses the flashy, short-lived bursts of motivated effort. Motivation also misleads because it feels like a sustainable driver. People confuse energy spikes with long-term capability. They believe that if they could just stay inspired, they would achieve everything they want. This is why so many ambitious people fail. They rely on something inherently unreliable. Discipline, by contrast, works regardless of feeling, environment, or external circumstances. It creates a foundation where success is not a matter of chance or mood, but a natural consequence of continued effort over time. Compounding discipline also shifts focus from intensity to consistency. Motivation encourages sporadic, intense effort, which often burns people out. Discipline encourages manageable, repeatable actions, which sustain effort indefinitely. It removes the need to constantly reignite passion or force energy. Over time, the cumulative effect of steady effort is far more powerful than intermittent bursts of intensity. The loud flare of motivation may attract attention and feel thrilling, but it cannot replace the steady, quiet accumulation of results built through discipline. The compounding effect of discipline is further amplified because it is cumulative across all areas of life. Skills learned, habits formed, and behaviors repeated influence one another. Mastery in one area often spills over into others, creating leverage that multiplies the impact of effort. Motivation rarely achieves this. Motivation-driven effort often remains isolated, short-lived, and difficult to transfer. Discipline, through compounding, creates interconnected growth that scales over time, producing outcomes far greater than any single surge of inspiration could ever deliver. Ultimately, discipline's compounding power is invisible at first. It requires patience, persistence, and trust in the process. Unlike motivation, which burns brightly and demands attention, discipline works quietly behind the scenes, executing small actions day after day, week after week. Over time, those small, consistent actions accumulate into remarkable results that surprise those who relied solely on motivation. Because the outcomes of discipline are predictable, durable, and exponential, while motivation is ephemeral, loud, and fleeting, making it exciting in the moment, but incapable of sustaining the long-term growth and achievement that come only from continuous, repeated effort applied over years, unseen by most, underestimated by many, and appreciated fully only when the quiet compounding finally manifests into undeniable, irreversible progress, skill, and impact. The market rewards consistency, not intensity. And this principle is what separates those who achieve long-term success from those who burn brightly and fade quickly. Most people overestimate the power of intensity because it feels dramatic and impressive. They equate working hard in short bursts with actual results, assuming that a few explosive days of effort can make up for months of inattention. The truth is the opposite. The market, whether in business, skill development, or personal growth, does not measure how intensely you act on a given day. It measures whether you show up repeatedly over time, whether your effort compounds, and whether your actions are predictable and reliable. Intensity without consistency is like a thunderclap in the night, loud, noticeable for a moment, but quickly forgotten and leaving no lasting impact. Consistency creates credibility. When people, clients, or systems see that you deliver results day after day, they begin to trust your output. They do not trust sporadic intensity, no matter how impressive it may appear. 1 week of extraordinary effort is often discounted if it is followed by weeks of absence or underperformance. Markets, organizations, and audiences respond to reliability because reliability reduces risk. Showing up consistently signals competence, resilience, and predictability, all of which are valued far more than raw bursts of effort that fade as quickly as they appear. Consistency compounds, whereas intensity is fleeting. A small, deliberate action repeated daily accumulates exponentially over time. A single day of exceptional effort may feel impactful, but it cannot match the cumulative effect of consistent execution. For example, writing 500 words every day will produce a book in a matter of months, while writing 5,000 words on one day and nothing for the next 10 weeks will leave you far behind. The market rewards the visible output, and the visible output comes from regular, ongoing effort, not sporadic highs. Intensity is seductive because it feels productive. People equate excitement and adrenaline with progress. A long, exhausting day at work, a marathon workout, or an all-night session on a project feels meaningful, but it rarely produces lasting results if it is not followed by repetition. Intensity tires the mind and body, creating fatigue that discourages further effort. Without a system of consistent action to balance these spikes, intensity becomes self-limiting. It burns brightly, but it also burns out, leaving gaps that consistency would have filled. Consistency also builds resilience, which intensity alone cannot. When effort is sustained over time, you learn to navigate obstacles, adapt to setbacks, and refine your approach. Each day of showing up reinforces your ability to persist through adversity. Intensity, on the other hand, often relies on temporary emotional surges, which cannot be maintained under stress or difficulty. When challenges arise, those who rely on intensity collapse, while those who have built habits of consistent action continue forward, accumulating advantage while others falter. The market does not reward effort in isolation. It rewards results, and results are the product of sustained action. Sporadic bursts of effort may produce small wins, but the gaps between efforts leave opportunity for others to surpass you. Consistency ensures that progress is ongoing, visible, and measurable. Over time, even small, regular contributions add up to dominance in a field. Intensity is impressive for a moment, but rarely produces the durable output that markets actually value. Consistency also fosters learning and mastery. Regular practice, even at a moderate pace, allows for repetition, feedback, and improvement. Skills are honed incrementally. Systems are tested and refined. Knowledge deepens. Intense but irregular effort lacks the iterative process necessary to develop competence. The market recognizes those who can reliably produce at a high level over time, not those who occasionally perform spectacularly but inconsistently. The psychological impact of consistency cannot be understated. Showing up daily builds confidence, self-trust, and identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, regardless of circumstances. This internal reliability translates to external performance. Intensity may boost ego temporarily, making you feel capable for a day, but it does not cultivate the long-term confidence that comes from proving to yourself repeatedly that you can execute, adapt, and deliver. Consistency internalizes trust in your abilities, and that trust fuels further progress. Consistency also outperforms intensity in building relationships and networks. People prefer to collaborate with individuals who can be counted on over time. A client, colleague, or partner does not value a single day of extreme effort as much as a history of steady, dependable performance. Reliability builds reputation, which compounds influence, opportunity, and leverage. Intensity alone rarely produces the same enduring trust because it is unpredictable and unsustainable. Another key aspect is that consistency smooths volatility. The market punishes extremes that are not sustained. Peaks of effort followed by troughs of inactivity create risk and instability. Consistent contributors reduce volatility, which reduces friction in both personal and professional ecosystems. Systems, processes, and results stabilize when effort is continuous, making growth predictable and scalable. Intensity alone cannot stabilize performance because it is reactive, energy-dependent, and prone to burnout. The compounding effect of consistency becomes increasingly visible over time. Small actions may feel insignificant in the moment, but as they accumulate, they create leverage that magnifies results. 1 hour of work every day builds momentum, credibility, and skill that intensifies the impact of each subsequent hour. Intense but isolated efforts rarely compound because they do not create a foundation for ongoing growth. Momentum requires regular input, not sporadic bursts. Ultimately, the market rewards those who show up, deliver, and persist. It does not reward dramatic effort on a single day, nor does it reward enthusiasm without follow-through. Consistency creates visibility, trust, and measurable progress. Intensity without consistency is noise. Consistency without intensity produces durable results. Those who understand this principle focus on building systems, routines, and habits that allow them to operate predictably and effectively over time. They do not chase fleeting bursts of inspiration. They cultivate sustainable output that compounds, adapts, and dominates gradually, quietly, and reliably, understanding that the loudest displays of effort rarely outlast the steady rhythm of continuous, disciplined action that the market ultimately measures, values, and rewards. Boring execution beats exciting intentions because real progress is built in the repetition of small, disciplined actions, not in the rush of grand ideas or fleeting bursts of enthusiasm. Most people are enamored with intention because it feels dramatic and meaningful. Setting a goal, imagining success, or feeling a surge of inspiration gives a sense of movement, as if something significant is happening. You feel energized, confident, and ready to conquer the world. But intention alone is lightweight. It occupies the mind without producing tangible change. The momentary thrill of planning or envisioning success is seductive, yet it rarely translates into measurable outcomes. Excitement without execution is a mirage. It feels like work, but leaves nothing behind. Execution, by contrast, is often mundane. Repetition, by contrast, is often mundane, repetitive, and tedious. It lacks the drama of intention and the emotional gratification of inspiration. Execution requires showing up, performing the task, refining it, and doing it again tomorrow. It is consistent and methodical, The work is often invisible, unnoticed by others, and unaccompanied by immediate reward. Yet this is exactly why it wins over intention. Boring execution compounds, producing results over time that cannot be achieved through bursts of motivation or brilliant ideas alone. Ideas without follow-through remain theoretical, while consistent execution transforms potential into reality. The human brain is wired to seek novelty and excitement, which makes intention more appealing than execution. Imagining a successful outcome triggers dopamine, giving a short-term sense of satisfaction, as if progress has been made. Execution, however, requires persistence in the face of monotony, and the initial reward is often delayed or invisible. This creates a psychological tension that most people avoid. They gravitate toward intention because it feels good and avoids discomfort, mistaking activity for productivity. In reality, activity without implementation produces no results. It is merely mental exercise, a rehearsal rather than a performance. Boring execution is powerful because it builds momentum. Small, repeated actions create compounding effects that intensify over time. Each iteration improves skill, efficiency, and judgment. The work that seems insignificant on one day accumulates into meaningful progress over weeks, months, and years. Exciting intentions, no matter how ambitious, cannot create this accumulation. A single burst of energy or enthusiasm, no matter how intense, will be overtaken by those who consistently act day after day. The quiet, repetitive work that seems mundane at the moment lays the foundation for outcomes that eventually appear extraordinary. Execution also teaches lessons that intention cannot. Ideas without action remain hypothetical. They're tested in theory, but not in practice. Execution exposes weaknesses, reveals gaps in knowledge, and forces adaptation. Through repetition, mistakes are corrected, strategies are refined, and skills are developed. Intention does not provide this feedback loop. It is static, aspirational, and untested. Real mastery emerges not from how much you planned or imagined, but from how consistently you implement, learn, and adjust. Another reason boring execution beats exciting intentions is accountability. Execution requires measurable outcomes, whereas intention can exist purely in thought or speech. You can intend to work out, write, or build a business endlessly without ever doing it, and no one can call you out because nothing tangible has been promised or completed. Execution, by its nature, creates evidence, it exposes progress, and forces evaluation. By focusing on doing rather than planning, you create real metrics, real results, and real consequences, which drive further improvement and momentum. Consistency is at the heart of execution. Exciting intentions are often sporadic. They flare up and fade away depending on mood, environment, or external validation. Execution demands routine. It requires showing up even when unmotivated, even when energy is low, and even when results are not yet visible. This repetition builds resilience, competence, and efficiency, creating a compounding advantage over those who rely on bursts of enthusiasm. Momentum grows in the invisible, repetitive work, while intention, without follow-through, dissipates into nothing. Execution also creates credibility and trust. In business, relationships, or personal growth, people and systems respond to reliability more than enthusiasm. Being known as someone who consistently delivers, even through boring, mundane work, builds reputation, influence, and opportunity. Exciting intentions, no matter how appealing, fail to generate trust because they are untested and inconsistent. Reliability, not inspiration, is the currency of long-term success. There is also a psychological dimension. Execution transforms identity. When you consistently perform tasks, you begin to see yourself as capable, disciplined, and competent. This self-perception reinforces future action, creating a positive feedback loop. Exciting intentions may temporarily boost confidence, but they do not reinforce identity because they are rarely tested in reality. True self-efficacy emerges from doing, not from imagining or planning. Execution compounds in ways that intention never can. Small actions repeated consistently lead to skill accumulation, efficiency, credibility, and tangible results. Intentions may motivate in the short term, but they cannot accumulate into results. Momentum, skill, and mastery are generated by persistent execution, not by energy or excitement. Those who succeed understand this principle. They focus on action over feeling, routine over inspiration, and output over intention. They accept that progress is often invisible, slow, and tedious in the moment, but its effects multiply over time, eventually producing outcomes that far surpass the promise of any exciting intention. The beauty of execution is that it transforms potential into reality. Every small, repeated act builds leverage, refines skill, and compounds advantage. Exciting intentions are ephemeral and easily forgotten, but boring execution quietly produces measurable results, shaping long-term success. The difference is simple. Ideas spark possibility. but action creates reality. Execution turns dreams into measurable outcomes, transforms plans into tangible accomplishments, and converts effort into results that persist and accumulate, quietly building a foundation that cannot be achieved by energy alone, excitement alone, or intention alone, because the work is not in the thrill of planning, but in the relentless, disciplined, and often mundane commitment to do the work day after day, whether it is enjoyable or not, whether anyone notices or not, and whether motivation is present or absent, until the small, consistent actions compound into undeniable progress that no burst of enthusiasm could ever match. Progress is rarely about intensity, speed, or enthusiasm. It is about patience, persistence, and the willingness to continue when no one is watching, and understanding this fundamentally changes how results are achieved. Most people overestimate the value of visible effort because it feels meaningful. They believe that working harder, faster, or louder will translate into success, but the truth is that long-term results are rarely determined by bursts of energy. Instead, they're determined by the accumulation of small, consistent actions carried out over time, often without recognition, reward, or immediate gratification. The work that produces real outcomes is often invisible, mundane, and repetitive, yet it compounds quietly, creating leverage and advantage that cannot be replicated by short-term effort alone. One of the primary challenges people face is the illusion that effort should feel significant in the moment. People expect that if they are truly committed, the work should feel intention, exciting, or at least rewarding immediately. When it does not, they often interpret this as a sign that they are doing something wrong or that their efforts are meaningless. This is a misunderstanding of how results are generated. Most impactful work begins in obscurity. The daily grind, the repetition of tasks, the slow accumulation of skills and knowledge does not provide instant gratification, but over time this disciplined work builds momentum that leads to exponential outcomes. The concept of unseen work also intersects with the human desire for social validation. People naturally want recognition for their efforts because it reinforces identity and provides emotional reward. However, the most critical progress often occurs when no one is observing. When no applause is given, and when the effort feels invisible. These moments test discipline because they remove the external reward system. True high performers internalize accountability. They act consistently regardless of recognition, understanding that the value of their effort exists independently of whether it is acknowledged externally. This ability to persist in invisibility is what separates temporary achievers from those who build enduring impact. Patience is a key component of unseen progress. In a culture obsessed with instant results, people are conditioned to expect immediate feedback. They measure success by visible outcomes rather than the process itself. This creates frustration when results are slow or subtle. Unseen work challenges this mindset, because the payoff often appears months or years later. Skills developed, relationships nurtured, and habits formed accumulate quietly, and only over time does the impact become visible. Patience allows one to maintain consistent effort during these periods of apparent stagnation, trusting that compounding will eventually produce measurable results. Persistence amplifies the effect of unseen work. There is rarely a straight line from effort to outcome. Setbacks, delays, and failures are inevitable. Without persistence, people abandon their work at the first sign of resistance or slow progress. Those who succeed understand that the path to meaningful results is rarely linear. Each repetition, each incremental improvement, and each small victory builds resilience and capability. Persistence transforms failure from a stopping point into a learning opportunity, and it transforms repetition into a mechanism for skill acquisition and refinement. The cumulative power of unseen effort is compounded by the principle of leverage. Small, consistent actions stack upon one another, creating results that far exceed the effort of any single action. For example, writing a page every day, making a single improvement to a process, or investing time in learning a new skill may feel insignificant individually, but over months and years, these actions compound into mastery, output, and influence that cannot be replicated through sporadic bursts of energy or inspiration. Consistent, unseen effort creates systems and habits that function automatically, reducing reliance on emotion or motivation, and allowing progress to continue even in the absence of immediate reward. Discipline is central to sustaining unseen work. Motivation, excitement, or inspiration are fleeting and cannot reliably drive the continuous, low-profile effort required for meaningful results. Discipline, however, does not depend on feelings. It enforces adherence to process, habits, and systems, even when the work is boring, repetitive, or unrecognized. This internalized structure enables individuals to continue making progress over time without relying on external validation or emotional highs, which is why discipline is often more valuable than inspiration. Another critical factor is the ability to tolerate delayed gratification. Unseen work often involves sacrificing short-term comfort or pleasure in favor of long-term outcomes. This could mean choosing to practice a skill rather than indulge in entertainment, completing tasks before seeking social engagement, or investing in learning rather than seeking immediate financial reward. Those who master the art of delayed gratification understand that the returns from unseen effort are rarely immediate but are exponentially larger when patience is maintained, compounding over time to create significant advantage. Unseen work also builds resilience in the face of uncertainty. Life and business rarely provide perfect conditions or immediate feedback. Waiting for the ideal moment to act often results in inaction. Those who succeed embrace the uncertainty inherent in unseen work. They act consistently regardless of guarantees, understanding that the reliability of effort, not the guarantee of results, is what ultimately produces meaningful outcomes. This mindset reduces dependency on external conditions and strengthens the ability to navigate complexity, ambiguity, and risk over time. Finally, unseen work fosters humility. By focusing on process rather than recognition, individuals develop an appreciation for the value of effort and the slow accumulation of results. They learn that success is rarely glamorous in the early stages, and that the most significant achievements often emerge from persistent, disciplined effort performed quietly and consistently over long periods. Humility allows them to continue acting without needing validation, understanding that results are a consequence of persistence, patience, and incremental improvement rather than immediate reward or applause. The reality is that success is invisible long before it becomes obvious. The people who achieve it consistently are those who are willing to act without recognition, to maintain effort without external validation, and to trust in the compounding power of their actions. They understand that the market, life, and skill accumulation reward those who persist quietly, steadily, and methodically over time. Every small act of consistency builds leverage. Every repeated effort strengthens habits, skill, and confidence. Every day spent showing up without fanfare compounds into results that eventually become undeniable. The unseen work becomes the foundation for extraordinary outcomes, demonstrating that patience, persistence, and disciplined effort outperform sporadic intensity or the pursuit of visible acclaim, creating a trajectory where slow, consistent effort ultimately delivers far greater results than any burst of short-lived energy, inspiration, or intention could ever achieve. And those who embrace this principle gain a durable advantage that cannot be replicated by those who chase recognition or excitement alone. Success is rarely about talent, luck, or fleeting inspiration. It is built on accountability, ownership, and the refusal to blame external circumstances for outcomes. And understanding this principle fundamentally changes how results are achieved. Most people fail not because they lack ability or opportunity, but because they fail to accept full responsibility for their actions and their results. It is easier to attribute failure to external factors, economy, competition, timing, resources, than to acknowledge that consistent decisions, habits, and execution ultimately determine outcomes. Blaming circumstances provides temporary relief and protects ego, but it also strips control and prevents growth. True progress begins the moment you recognize that you are accountable for your results, no matter the conditions around you. Ownership is the foundation of accountability. It means seeing your actions, decisions, and accountability. It means seeing your actions, decisions, and outcomes as fully your responsibility. When you adopt this mindset, you stop looking for excuses and start looking for solutions. It requires honesty, self-reflection, and a willingness to confront your weaknesses without defensiveness. Ownership does not mean ignoring external constraints, but it means refusing to allow them to dictate your effort or define your results. By taking responsibility for the process rather than hoping for perfect conditions, you are in control of your trajectory and create the conditions necessary for consistent progress. One of the challenges people face is the tendency to externalize blame because it feels safer. If failure is someone else's fault, it protects identity and avoids discomfort. If the market is unfair, the system is broken, or circumstances are difficult, then personal inadequacy is not exposed. While this may ease emotional tension temporarily, it is corrosive over time. Without ownership, learning is stunted because feedback is ignored or misinterpreted. Growth occurs only when you recognize that results are tied to your decisions, your effort, and your consistency, and that failure is a signal to adjust your approach rather than to assign blame. Accountability also drives action because it removes the question of permission. Waiting for external approval or favorable conditions creates procrastination. When you adopt full ownership, you accept that the responsibility to act lies entirely with you. You no longer wait for motivation, recognition, or ideal circumstances. You execute because progress depends on your choices, not on the environment. This shift from reactive to proactive behavior is crucial. It transforms dependency into autonomy, enabling sustained effort regardless of challenges or obstacles. Discipline and accountability are intertwined. Discipline ensures that actions are taken consistently, while accountability ensures that the results of those actions are owned fully. Without discipline, accountability has little meaning because inconsistent effort produces unreliable outcomes. Without accountability, discipline can become mechanical and uninformed, lacking reflection and adjustment. Together, they form the foundation for compounding progress. Each decision, each repeated action, and each reflection on results creates a feedback loop that strengthens both skill and outcome over time. Ownership also strengthens resilience. When you accept accountability, setbacks and failures are reframed as opportunities for learning rather than as proof of inadequacy or injustice. Externalizing blame reduces resilience because it creates a sense of helplessness. You begin to perceive obstacles as insurmountable and your ability to influence outcomes as limited. Ownership reverses this perspective. Every obstacle becomes a challenge within your control to overcome. Every mistake becomes data to adjust strategy and improve. This mindset cultivates persistence, adaptability, and problem-solving skills that compound over time. Accountability amplifies the compounding power of action. When you own results, you monitor progress closely, analyze outcomes, and make adjustments. This creates efficiency and accelerates growth. Those who blame circumstances often repeat the same mistakes because they externalize feedback. Accountability transforms errors into lessons, turning setbacks into leverage. Each small improvement compounds, producing results that are disproportionately larger than the individual effort applied, because each iteration is smarter, more refined, and more intentional than the last. Accountability also builds trust, credibility, and influence. In business, leadership, or personal relationships, people gravitate toward those who take responsibility for outcomes. Blame and excuses erode credibility, whereas ownership demonstrates reliability, integrity, and competence. The social leverage compounds alongside technical or skill-based progress, opening opportunities, collaborations, and advantages that are inaccessible to those who avoid responsibility. Results are never solely about technical execution. Perception, trust, and relational capital amplify the impact of accountable action. The psychological effect of accountability is equally important. Taking full ownership cultivates confidence, focus, and self-trust. When you repeatedly execute and evaluate outcomes with honesty, you build an internal feedback loop that reinforces competence. You stop seeking validation externally because you see the direct connection between your effort and the outcome. Motivation becomes secondary because the internal drive to own results sustains action. Over time, this internal locus of control becomes a compounding advantage. As consistent, accountable behavior outpaces sporadic, externally driven effort, another dimension is the elimination of victimhood. People who blame circumstances often adopt a passive mindset, waiting for conditions to align before acting. This delays action indefinitely. Ownership breaks the cycle of passivity. It shifts focus from what cannot be controlled to what can be influenced. Decisions, habits, consistency, and execution are within the sphere of control, even when external factors are unfavorable. By focusing energy on controllable elements and accepting full responsibility for outcomes, progress becomes predictable, measurable, and under personal control rather than dependent on chance or external fairness. Ownership also magnifies the value of persistence. Every choice made with accountability compounds over time. Each step, no matter how small, contributes to outcomes because it is taken intentionally and with awareness. Unlike effort motivated by external rewards or conditions, accountable effort is self-sustaining. The results do not depend on recognition or external validation. They depend on consistent, deliberate action executed under the principle of responsibility. Over time, the compound effect of this behavior produces results that far exceed the sporadic, reactive, or excuse-laden actions of those who externalize blame. The reality is that no one is coming to save your results. Waiting for luck, opportunity, or favorable circumstances leaves progress to chance. Accountability ensures that you are always driving toward your goals regardless of external conditions. By embracing ownership, you transform challenges into leverage, mistakes into lessons, and effort into compounding results. The people who achieve exceptional outcomes are those who refuse to blame others or circumstances. They accept full responsibility, take consistent action, adapt based on feedback, and persist quietly when no one is watching. Understanding that results are not a gift from conditions, but the natural consequence of disciplined, accountable behavior that compounds over time, creating advantage, mastery, and impact that cannot be replicated by anyone unwilling to own their choices and execute relentlessly. And so, when motivation fades and the excitement dies, it is discipline, consistency, execution, and ownership that carry you forward. The work that seems boring, the steps that feel small, and the effort no one notices are the very actions that compound into extraordinary results. Motivation is temporary. But the habits you build, the systems you follow, and the accountability you hold yourself to are permanent. If you want to achieve what most cannot, you must pay the price every single day, long after the spark of inspiration is gone, because it is the relentless, disciplined commitment to showing up that separates those who dream from those who win.